All right, folks, we are back with another episode of the MOA Broadcast. We've got all kinds of good information for us today, so we're going to get right into it. Picking up where we left off last week. So if you caught last week's episode, and this has been all over the news anyway, you'll recall that the AP, the Associated Press, has been, shall we say, deadlocked in a battle of wills with the White House, and particularly President Trump, it seems. President Trump, when he took office, and again, just to preface all of this, we are apolitical here. We're not going to get into the political side of things, but we do discuss current events. And right now, a lot of those events happen to be in the political realm. So we're not going to inject our opinions. We're going to do what the news used to do, which is just give you the information, and then you can draw your own conclusions. So, that being said, as of last week, the AP refused to recognize the fact that President Trump had renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Now, this is something that he legally is allowed to do or has the authority to do, and he did this in conjunction or cooperation with the Department of the Interior. So he renamed it the Gulf of America. The Associated Press refused, for whatever reason, to recognize this, and so they were not allowed to come in for certain press briefings until they decided to change their mind and address it by the name it is legally now known by in the United States, which is Gulf of America. Google Maps, Apple Maps, and other online maps providers followed suit and began listing it as the Gulf of America, but for some reason the AP refuses to do so. So, President Donald Trump said Tuesday that he will continue to restrict the Associated Press access to his events and news conferences until the news outlet goes along with his renaming of the Gulf of Mexico in its reports. Now, specifically, they are banned from the Oval Office and Air Force One. They are still allowed to go into the White House, apparently, and have their, press pass or whatever it is that they call it there to get clearance to get inside the White House, but they're not allowed into certain press briefings. According to Trump, we are going to keep them out until such time as they agree that it's the Gulf of America, Trump said, speaking to reporters who witnessed the signing of an executive order at Mar-a-Lago, his Florida estate. We're very proud of this country, and we want it to be the Gulf of America. This was the first time the president directly addressed this after two journalists from the AP were denied entrance to Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday. There was a press conference. There was a press conference in Mar-a-Lago or whatever it was on Tuesday. The AP reporters were not allowed inside. They had to watch a live television feed of Trump's remarks and were unable to ask questions. They were put on detention, apparently. The AP has framed this dispute as a First Amendment issue, but Trump's team says access to its events is a privilege extended by invitation, and that while the AP is still permitted on White House grounds, it no longer has the right to be part of pools that cover events where space is limited, such as the Oval Office and Air Force One. So, when I look at this news report, it seems like maybe we're spending an inordinate amount of time on such a simple thing, but I don't know what the Associated Press, politics aside, forget that. What does the AP hope to gain by getting locked into a battle of wills with a president that has shown for decades, before he was even in the Oval Office, that he's not inclined to back down from things? So I don't really see what the AP stands to win from this. And so far, they have lost their access to the Oval Office and Air Force One for press briefings. So, which means someone else has taken that place. The space they formerly occupied has now been given to someone else. So I don't know what they really stand to gain out of this and why they've dug their heels in so deeply. But we are committed to accurate and current reporting. So as of now, they are banned from those areas. We will keep you updated if there are any developments in this. All right, moving on to our next report, we go to New York. New York City, what has become of you? A man says he was beaten with his own baseball bat on a subway in A man says he was beaten with his own baseball bat, and I'm not laughing at this poor man. No disrespect to him. He went through it. We'll get to that here momentarily. On a subway in Soho early Monday morning. Soho stands for south of Houston Street. So this is lower Manhattan. This is kind of an artsy-fartsy area. Lots of nice dining, shops, all kinds of interesting things. But this was at 1 a.m. So what happened? The victim told the news that the attack came out of nowhere and they are still looking for the suspect. Jared Adorno, 25, says a fun night out in the city with his friends turned to horror on the 4 train as he was heading home around 1:30 a.m. Monday. When the train stopped at Spring Street, another man got on, and Adorno says by the time the doors closed, the man had grabbed a plastic baseball bat from Adorno's backpack and started hitting him in the face. We don't know why exactly. Although the suspect demanded his belongings, Adorno says he managed to get away once the train doors opened at the Bleecker Street station. So for at least several long seconds or a minute or 3, he was fighting this man who had taken his own plastic baseball bat away from him and started to beat him about the face with it like an enraged Jose Canseco attack gone awry. I had blood just stained all over here on the side of my face. My jacket was covered in blood. He just started going for it. I'm over here blocking, doing the best I can. Adorno was transported to a nearby hospital, was left with bruising and swelling about the head, a broken nose, and dozens of stitches throughout his face. Let's see if we've got a picture. Let's go to the MOA computer here. My goodness. This poor guy, he's in the photograph here. Let's see if we can. I mean, he's got his nose bandaged. Both eyes are swollen, totally shut. His forehead is swollen. There are bruises and cuts all over his face. This guy, the attacker, did a number on this poor man who was apparently just minding his own business. New York, okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Adorno was transported to a nearby hospital, left with bruising and swelling, a broken nose doesn't. Okay, I didn't sustain any hemorrhaging in the brain, so I'm just happy about that. I feel like I had an angel on my side, Adorno said. Now that he can finally open his right eye, he said the internal swelling has gone down. Doctors anticipate he will make a full recovery. So far, no arrests have been made. Despite this now, this is the interesting thing about statistics. Despite this brazen attack, NYPD data shows transit crime that takes place on MTS, they call it, or they used to call it, Metro Transit Authority. The MTA is the public transportation system in New York. Now, surprisingly, it is quite good. The coverage there is rather amazing for a city of that size and that many people. If you are taking MTA in New York City, there are very few places you can't get really close to, either with a train or a train followed up by a bus ride and then being dropped, usually within a few blocks. Most of the city has really, really very good coverage. It's very well covered in the city there. So their MTA, at least it used to be, was very good as far as coverage. Now they say their transit crime is down 6% from this time last year. Now, here's the funny thing about statistics. Unless this particular man was attacked violently and assaulted last year, while transit crime itself may be down 6%, for him, it is up 100%. So, there's an old saying, figures don't lie, but liars figure. And that's what we see here. I'm not saying that the NYPD, their data is lying, but you got to put it in the context, the perspective of what has happened to you. This poor guy was just riding the bus home or the train home, and all of a sudden he's getting violently beaten down with a baseball bat for no apparent reason. The guy tried to rob him. He didn't give up his goods. He managed to escape. Fortunately, when he got off at the Bleecker Street station and made it to street level. There was a cop car not too far away, so he was able to report it. But unfortunately, this guy has not been apprehended. He got off near Spring and Prince Street. Well, it's unfortunate that he was going through such a difficult time where he was, because Prince Street Pizza is there. I have never had the opportunity to go, but I left New York right around the time, or visited a number of times right around the time they were opening. They have square pies. So, well, let's just get into that. If you've never been to New York is an amazing place. I don't know what it is. Let me rephrase that. It was an amazing place. From everything I've seen on the news and everything that I've spoken with people that still currently live there, it's almost a disaster zone, like in the movie Escape from New York. If you're not familiar with the movie Escape from New York, probably one of Kurt Russell's best motion pictures, insofar as just being a lot of fun and adventure and entertaining. He plays this, essentially for the purposes of this context, he's a mercenary. The President of the United States, his plane goes down. New York at this time, this was one of those 80s like apocalyptic style movies by John Carpenter, the director. And New York has been, because Manhattan is an island, it's been basically fenced off, it's been isolated, and Manhattan is a prison. So the worst of the worst go to Manhattan, and they're dumped there, and they're just left to rule and to exist amongst themselves, and whoever is strongest wins and survives. And so Kurt Russell, the president's plane goes down. He has some top secret information, and he's got to go to some world summit to, do his thing as president. And Kurt Russell has to go in there and rescue him. So, but the whole thing is New York is just this hellscape of a nightmare. There's violent crime, freaks, and all this kind of crazy. It's a pretty entertaining movie. But that's almost what New York City is like now. I was just watching a video the other day in New York City in broad daylight. There was this guy who was walking around buck naked with a metal pole of some sort, and he was just attacking people. It's probably during the daytime, it's in the teens, 20s. It's freezing there, maybe 30s during the daytime. It looked pretty cold on this day, judging by what people were wearing. And this guy is walking around buck naked and beating people with this stick. I mean, what in the world? New York used to be this amazing place. To me, coming from the Midwest, one of the things that stuck out to me the most, because in the Midwest, your population is fairly homogenous. It's almost all white people for the most part, and white culture and white food. So when you get to New York, you see an astonishing amount of diversity you've never seen before if you're from, the country in the Midwest like I was. You go there, and to me, one of the things that stuck out to me the most were the lines of demarcation, neighborhoods, where it was almost like when you crossed over one block into another, it was a totally different neighborhood from crossing one side of the street to the other. You could be going along in a Puerto Rican neighborhood, and then you would go a couple of blocks, cross over cross the crosswalk or the sidewalk or the street or whatever. Then you're in an Italian neighborhood. And then a couple of blocks, you'd be in a Jewish neighborhood. And the culture was so strong and unique to each neighborhood. It was like each little neighborhood was its own little city or country. If you were in a Jewish neighborhood, you wanted to go to the bakeries and you wanted to go to the delis and get a Reuben sandwich or corned beef or pastrami, probably not corned beef, but pastrami, and all the other things that they would have at a Jewish deli. The food was delicious. In certain neighborhoods, you would want to get a Cuban coffee. You go to Italian neighborhoods and you want to get, stromboli or calzones or pizza or whatever the case may be. But it was just amazing, the amount of diversity and the way it was divided up in New York City. Now, I have no idea what the city is like as far as all that, but we know from what we see on the news that there is a tremendous increase in crime and all kinds of other problems, so it's a real shame. That being said, before we get too far off track, what do we learn from this gentleman's case? Poor Mr. Adorno that was attacked with his own baseball bat. Situational awareness. That's what this really comes back down to again. Now, I'm not saying this guy did anything wrong. He may have done everything right. Sometimes, I've been on the train in New York. When those doors close, man, it's game on. Sometimes it's like the Thunderdome in there. Many times there are no problems at all. You take your ride and it's no big deal. Once those doors close, though, anything can and probably will happen depending on the neighborhood and the time of day. Situational awareness, though, we've discussed this before. What is the point? Situational awareness is not just being aware of your surroundings, it's seeing problems before they manifest themselves. Okay? You see, okay, something's coming up here. Oh, this guy coming on. Like you could usually, not always, but usually you could tell, or many times you could tell when somebody was getting ready to board the train. Because when you're sitting on the train, you usually have your earphones on or you're reading something or whatever else. But when you would pull into the train stop, at least I would, you would always be scanning all the people as the train pulls in. You pass all these people standing there on the platform waiting to get on. And you're looking, okay, that person looks like a problem. That one doesn't. That may be a threat. And you're trying to identify these threats and problems before those doors open, because once the doors open and people rush in, the doors close. Then you're locked in there until the next station. And I'm telling you from experience, a lot can happen from one station to the next. So situational awareness would be the thing to hopefully see this coming, either create this. Your first goal in a situation like that is going to almost always be to create distance, meaning get some space between you and the other person. I don't know what happened here. And again, we're not knocking the poor guy that got beat down, because the picture of this guy, he got brutalized, just brutalized. But it's possible, again, the story doesn't go into detail. It's possible he may have been more aware of what's going on and may have been able to prevent the situation or create some distance, or maybe exit the car or change cars before this happened. And he was brutally beaten for no reason at all. We're glad he made it out okay. The other thing is everyone, especially in Midwestern and Southern states, they always say, well, the Second Amendment, or, me carrying this, that, and the other. Firearms aren't always an option for a lot of people for a number of reasons. And the other thing is, you got to remember that firearms, if you use a firearm, that's your business, not mine, you're going to have some legal issues that go along with it afterwards. That's a rather final solution to certain problems. Pepper spray is almost universally accepted, and you obviously have to check your local laws. There are some places that frown upon it, but pepper spray is a great option if your laws allow it, because at the end of the day, everybody goes home alive. So we'll get more into that later, but pepper spray is a good one. If you have it, you should definitely familiarize yourself with it. It has a different level of effect on certain people and animals. I've had to use, here where I live in the hills of Oregon, I've gone through several cans of pepper spray in the last couple of years due to stray dogs attacking me while I'm walking my dog. Most dogs do not like having pepper spray used on them, and they typically tend to run away and leave you alone, and they tend to remember it the next time you come around. Sometimes other dogs are affected less by it, but the important thing is situational awareness and have a plan. Be prepared before it comes to some guy disarming you with your own baseball bat and brutalizing you with it on the 4 train. Okay, one more story before we get to the break. This time we go yet again to Florida. We'll just call him Andre, 20, dressed up with an FBI jacket and body armor when he visited a haunted house in Seminole. That is, let's see, in Seminole. According to a police report, the Florida man was armed with a black airsoft handgun that resembled a Glock handgun. While walking through the haunted house, Andre turned the corner to where the host of the house was standing. The host was in a costume but wasn't part of the role-playing at the time of the incident. Before he knew what happened, Andre pulled his gun from his holster and began to pistol whip him with the handle of the gun repeatedly, hitting him just under his eye, causing significant injury. Now imagine this. You're just some guy doing a free haunted house in your local neighborhood in Seminole, Oregon. I think that's near Clearwater. Okay? Actually, I think it's about 40 minutes west of Tampa in mid-Florida. You're just doing a haunted house, and all of a sudden some guy flips out, pulls out an airsoft gun, and starts pistol whipping you for no reason. After the pistol whipping was completed, the man told the victim that he thought he was a statue. He refused to apologize, and then he laughed and ran out of the house. The victim chased him out of the house to prevent him from leaving. The sheriff's office listed the charges as aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and added a felony because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Apparently in Florida, and maybe elsewhere, I have no idea, it's against the law to commit violence to another person while wearing a bulletproof vest. The victim was treated by EMS for bleeding under his eye. Wow, Florida continues to amaze. Okay, we are going to take a break. After the break, we're going to get into the 10 C's of survival. We teased this last week. We're going to get deeper into it after the break. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
You're listening to the MOA Broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? All right, we are back from the break. Now, before the break, we mentioned the 10 C's of survival. C as in Charlie, the 10 C's of survival. Now, we mentioned this in our last episode as well. Going to go ahead and flesh that out a little bit more in this episode. So, what are the 10 C's of survival? A number of people over the years have done various versions of this list. Basically, it's just an easy way to keep in mind a handful of essentials that you should have with you whenever you go out into the backwoods. As we've seen a number of times in this program, that oftentimes people, one of the things that gets people the most is they're just simply not prepared to make it out alive. And yet again, that is the purpose of the show. It's not just about having some particular tool, having some particular, skill or toy or whatever. It's about a prepared mindset and thinking about what could go wrong before it happens. That's how you make it out alive. It's not just having the latest and the greatest in technology. It's really about preparing, expecting the unexpected, as Dalton would say. So let's get into a brief story. We go to the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. Now, for those of you outside the U.S., as we have a number of international listeners, most people, when they think of New York, they think of New York City and maybe even more specifically Manhattan, which is called the city in New York. Upstate New York, and upstaters will be very quick to tell you this very loudly, is very different from New York City. You start getting upstate, it starts getting more rural. Even though there are cities, it's just a very, very different atmosphere and type of people and situation and whatever you want to call it from being in the city, okay? That being said, if you're ever upstate, especially near Rochester, I want to recommend getting yourself a garbage plate. It's been a number of years now since I've had one, but I think they were meat. Basically, it's like a big bowl or plate of comfort food. There's meat, cheese, potatoes, and I seem to remember quite a bit of hot sauce. It goes down really good with a couple of beers. So if you're in New York, especially upstate, get yourself a garbage plate and thank me later. You'll enjoy it. All right, now we go to the Adirondacks. We're not going to use this lady's name. Unfortunately, she did not make it out alive. But the female hiker of Delaware was found dead on McNaughton Mountain in the Adirondacks on Saturday. She may have been a very experienced hiker, reports say, but according to other reports, she was not adequately prepared for a winter hike in the Adirondack High Peaks. These are mountains that are around 5,000 feet, not extremely tall. But the minute you start getting a little bit of elevation, weather can be very unpredictable. So she was in the Adirondack High Peaks, around 5,000 feet. Of Wilmington, Delaware. She has been described by those who know her as an avid hiker who was experienced and passionate about mountaineering. She went hiking in the Adirondack High Peaks region on Friday and was reported missing on Saturday morning when she was supposed to meet with a group of hikers. Unfortunately, her body was found later in the day on McNaughton Mountain, assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. The coroner who did her case said she was not properly dressed, wearing only a pair of sneakers for footwear. She was wearing drawstring fleece sweatpants, and her clothes were reportedly soaked through. She also did not have gear such as a space blanket or good fire-starting material. So we already know where this is going, but what is the point? She was not prepared. I don't understand. I guess maybe it goes back to when the ultralight movement of hiking started, kind of making its way in. Used to, 30, 40 years or more ago, when people went hiking or backpacking, they had these big, thick, heavy leather boots that were, basically they were almost mountaineering boots in a lot of cases, but they were hiking boots. Very heavy. And for someone just going on a day hike, it was kind of overkill. And if you were going to be doing like a through trail or going on a long backpacking trip, especially on very well-established trails, these boots were overkill. They were very heavy. And what happened is if you were at elevation, you were around snow a lot, you had to keep waterproofing these boots. Otherwise, the leather would start absorbing moisture and it would just become a mess. They would never, ever dry out because it's so cold and so wet. And it would just, they very quickly became very heavy, very cumbersome, very cold because they're soaked and they're freezing. So then you would fill them with waterproofer, whether it's mink oil or neat's foot oil or whatever in the world was available at the time. Snow Seal came out, yada, yada, yada. And the boots just kept getting heavier and heavier, and it was just it was kind of an ordeal. And so ultralight hiking kind of came out, and guys started. I think Jardine was one of the first guys, if memory serves me, but I haven't read some of these books in a long time, so forgive me if I'm incorrect. But they started pushing wearing tennis shoes to go hiking, because especially on very well-established trails, and if you're not mountaineering or anything, it was very easy to get by on a weekend hike or even a several-day hike wearing tennis shoes. They're very comfortable. More importantly, they were very light, and they provided enough support if you were going ultralight. Ultralight meaning a backpack weight of, maybe 10, 15, 18 pounds or something like that, maybe 20, 25 pounds fully loaded, which is not that much if you're a decent size and you're an experienced backpacker. So the tennis shoe thing kind of became popular, but this was before we had the technology we have now, the advancements in synthetic materials and shoes and so forth. These were just regular old tennis shoes. So guys would sometimes wear through these, in a couple of days or weeks, and they would have another pair waiting for them at their next drop, their supply drop. Now we have shoes that are hybrids between like regular boots and hiking boots and duty boots and tennis shoes. They cover a lot of different things while giving you the support you need, but they're much lighter, waterproof, and so forth. That being said, I do not understand for the life of me why so many people are wearing tennis shoes on these trails. I was always taught growing up that footwear is absolutely one of the most important things, because if your feet or ankles fail you, you are in serious trouble. And if you're uncomfortable in your feet or they're hurting, it's just going to go downhill from there. On my hundreds of miles, if not more, on the Oregon trails alone in the last couple of years, I cannot tell you how many people I've seen in open-toed hiking shoes. The thing with that is I know a lot of people are going to be fans of open-toed sandals and so forth. It's one of those things where it's just fine until it isn't. Then when the chips are down, like this poor lady, she's wearing sweatpants and tennis shoes at 5,000 feet. Okay? That's not acceptable, and unfortunately that contributed. We don't know exactly what happened, but it contributed to her loss of life. So let's get into the 10 C's. The first one, let's pull up the list here. We're going to go through and we'll name each category, and then we'll kind of flesh it out as we go on. The first one is a cutting tool. That basically means a knife. We'll come back to that one later. Knives are everyone's favorite topic to discuss, so we'll get to that in a moment. Next, we have a combustion device, cover or shelter, a container, cordage, candling, cotton material, cargo tape, compass, and a canvas needle. Now, I'm not going to go, we aren't going to have time. We could spend we could easily spend hours going through this list and the items involved here. We'll go through some of them. So, a cutting tool. Okay, let's just jump right in. That's almost everyone, when you talk to guys about the outdoors, okay, either the gun or the knife is the big, it's the hot rod. It's the showpiece they want to talk about and fantasize about and go through. We'll keep this simple. I'm a professional knife maker. I've been making knives for nearly 15 years now, professionally and full-time for a very good portion of that. The level of quality that we have with any decent piece of cutlery, whether it's custom-made, factory-made, is so much higher in a lot of ways than stuff we've had in the past that if you buy any decent, good quality piece of cutlery or knife, you're going to be okay. In most cases, what gets people is not the failure of their cutting tool. In fact, I have read easily hundreds of these survival stories that I share each week in the MOA broadcast. In most of them that I come across, the people don't even have a knife. Whether they live or die, they don't even have a knife on them. So I'm not discounting the importance of a cutting tool, especially a quality one. But you don't want to go, lose your mind over this. Obviously, if you're a knife aficionado, if you like knives and that's where you spend your money, then the sky is the limit. You can buy knives anywhere from $30 on up to thousands of dollars, depending on what you want to spend. In my mind, if you're buying a quality brand, I'm not going to name names for the purpose of this broadcast other than my own Wilson Custom Knives or Techline Knives, obviously, because I believe in what I do. If you're buying a decent, especially if it's an American-made piece, between $50 and $150, you're getting a good quality knife most likely. You can go from there on up to $300 to $500 or more, depending on what you want to spend. But if you buy a $10 knife from the cheapo box store, you're gonna get probably what you expect. Okay, so spend a couple of dollars. It doesn't have to be fancy. If you like knives, and obviously you can spend more, but it doesn't have to be fancy to work and to be utilitarian. Most of these situations are not like the survival scenarios we see in movies and books where the knife is the thing that made the difference in whether they survived or not. That isn't usually the reality of the situation. More often than not, it's about being prepared. That being said, a good full-tang knife. I make hollow-handled survival knives. I have a lot of faith in the knives that I've designed and made over the years. I've got tests where I beat them with axe handles and ball bats. I do chin-ups on them. The important thing, again, is not so much which particular knife you get. As long as it's decent quality, it's more about how you use it and the other things you have involved in your kit and the way you've prepared for the situation. So we'll get on to this cutting tool. That kind of covers a cutting tool. A combustion device was number 2. We covered this last week in our episode on fire. You're going to want at least 2 different methods for fire starting, because the old saying is 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If you only have one disposable lighter or one whatever your fire starting device is, if anything happens to it or you lose it, you now have 0. Okay, so 2 is 1, 1 is none. The next is going to be cover or shelter. Obviously, we've done several of these stories where if the people have been able to keep the snow and or the rain and these razor sharp winds from cutting through off of them, they would have lessened the impact of the exposure that they were facing. So keeping the wind off, that wind will lower your body temperature, can take away moisture, all kinds of problems. So cover and shelter is going to be very important. The next, a container. This applies more specifically in most cases to a water bottle. So whenever I go out, I have at least, even though I have multiple different water vessels with me, I always have one stainless steel canteen. Okay, and the reason for this being, I can boil it if need be. It's going to be durable. Sometimes your plastic bladders can get punctured, and then you lose not only the water you had in them, but then the potential for future gathering of water. So I like to have at least one metal container. That way I can boil water in it if need be, if I run out of either my filter gets broken or I don't have water purification tablets, I can put water right into the canteen and boil it, and I've got clean water. So that's important. Candling. This refers to a candle. I don't think most people are going to take candles, although we do have emergency candles for maybe inside your tent or other situations if you have adequate ventilation. But basically, this means a light source. Every one of my kits have multiple little flashlights, whether it's inside one of my waterproof hollow-handled survival knives, if it's inside of a little tin, if it's in a Ziploc bag, whatever you've got, you should have multiple sources of light, because you would be surprised how quickly you become basically paralyzed out in the wilderness if you can't see. If you all you have is artificial or natural light, once the sun goes down, you're done until the morning. Now, if you've got good moonlight, you can do some things, but it does not take the place of a good flashlight. Cargo tape. This refers primarily to duct tape. Duct tape is a great resource. Duct tape can be used, obviously, for taping things, for binding things. It can even be used for splinting. Duct tape also burns very well in most cases. Again, check your particular tape. I like taking along duct tape and some gaffer's tape. If you're not familiar with that, gaffer's tape, Gaffer, gaffer's tape. It's very similar to duct tape. Pardon me. Very similar to duct tape. It's a cloth-based type tape, but it does not leave the residue that duct tape leaves behind. I've got a roll of duct tape in all my bags, and in the truck, in the shop, everywhere. It's very handy stuff, and again, doesn't leave all that adhesive behind. The duct tape does. And then finally, we get to, did we go through? Oh, we missed one here. Cotton material. This basically refers to a bandana type item or something similar that can be used for making a sling. You can do some very rudimentary water purification with this, a head covering, neck or throat covering if it's windy, and so forth. We get to compass. Obviously, we don't need to explain the importance of a compass, but this is what I'll say about a compass. Even more important than having a quality compass is know how to use it. I have been hiking with a number of people who most of them did not have a compass of any kind other than the GPS on their phone. The ones that did have a compass, with maybe one or two exceptions, had no idea how to use it. Because it's more than just knowing, okay, I know which way north or south is now. What does that mean if you don't know where you are or where you're going or where you've been? So again, like all these items, have some experience and plan ahead. Use them and prepare with them. And then finally, a canvas needle or a sail needle. This is great for making repairs. You can even do some very minor surgery like getting out splinters or contaminants out of your flesh or out of a wound with these. They're good for puncturing as well. Again, do some research. Look up the 10 C's of survival. There's a lot of good information that we just won't have time to cover in depth. Remember, when you look at how you prioritize your 10 C's of survival or your kits or your bag, whatever, remember the rule of threes, okay? This is a very widely accepted rule in the backwoods and the world of survival, okay? You can go roughly, these are estimates, obviously. You can go 3 hours without shelter. That means exposed to the elements. 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Now, obviously, that's not written in stone, but that gives you an idea as to your priorities. Get yourself protected. Regulating your body temperature is extremely important. Regulate your body temperature, then worry about water to keep yourself hydrated. Food is usually a distant third. By far, the vast majority of these survival scenarios last 48 to 72 hours. Now, that's not saying they don't ever go the distance, but usually food is the least of your worries. Injury, exposure, and dehydration are what wind up getting people usually. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, we are going to finish on a high note here. Let's go to our final story of the day. This takes us to Victoria, Australia. A 7-foot kangaroo puts farmer in headlock and beats him up. I'm sorry, I'm not going to use this guy's real name. I'm not going to make fun of him anymore. I'm sure he's already been given it to him by his buddies. But let's just get into it. A man in his 70s was attacked by a kangaroo and has been left scarred by the macho marsupial, the report states. We'll just call him Terry. Terry, 74, was riding his motorcycle across his farm in the Australian state of Victoria on Saturday night when the kangaroo began following him. The kangaroo measured around 7 feet tall by Terry's estimations and started growling and jumping up and down, he told the local news station. Next thing I know, he was on top of me, Terry said. He had his top paws right around my back. We were almost headbutting each other. I just kept punching him until he let me go and he jumped away. According to Terry. So this guy is riding his motorcycle on his property and a 7-foot-tall kangaroo jumps out, grabs a hold of him and gets him in a headlock and starts headbutting him while he's punching him at the same time. Okay, let's go. We continue. Terry made a break for it, barely making it onto his motorcycle before the kangaroo charged for a second time. One more jump, and he would have been on top of me again, Terry says. The man was rushed to local hospital where he received stitches, bandages, and antibiotics. His shirt was torn up by the attack. If he hadn't had on a thick shirt, the abrasions would have been much more severe, Terry's wife said. So this kangaroo had a real bad attitude. I don't know what Terry did or didn't do, but it wasn't enough to tear him up once. The kangaroo came back for seconds. Okay, kangaroos, let's go into the technical side of this. Kangaroos can reach sizes of up to 200 pounds and around 7 feet tall, depending on the species. According to experts, they are powerful animals. Most attacks involve kicking people, leading to bruising and puncture wounds from their sharp toe claws. The sorts of injuries, Verns said, some expert, I don't know where the rest of his name is in this article, the sorts of injuries this guy received is typical. It was a bit strange that he was attacked repeatedly. Usually the kangaroo realizes its mistake, i.e. that you're not a kangaroo, you're a human, and that's the end of it. But apparently this kangaroo really wanted a piece of Terry, and he got it, folks. Speaking of kangaroo fighting tactics, their words, not mine. Kangaroo fighting tactics, the headlock is what male kangaroos do. They kick and rake with their feet and then try to throw their opponents with their powerful forearms. So they headlock, punch and kick you, and then judo slam you to the ground. I don't even really know why. So we get into this. This is something I didn't know. Alessia Carter, an associate professor in evolutionary anthropology at University College London, says kangaroo males don't protect females or the group, from what I've seen. They are simply protecting their potential to have a baby. So just being close to a mob, which is what a group of kangaroos are called, is enough to trigger this behavior. So maybe Terry rode through, there were some other females around, and Kangaroo Jack didn't like the cut of his jib, and he took it out on him repeatedly. I don't know. But apparently they don't do this to protect other kangaroos. It's just a matter of protecting mating potential. So be forewarned, Terry. Do not go back around Kangaroo Jack. Would pepper spray deter a kangaroo? I don't know. We won't have time to explore it in this episode, but we will get to it in another episode. That is going to do it for us today, folks. Remember, be forewarned. That is forearmed. Make sure you are prepared ahead of time to make it out alive, because if you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all.